It was late autumn, the fog clinging to the edges of the highway like a pale, restless ghost. I drove alone, headlights barely cutting through the mist, the road slick with a cold sheen from last night's rain. Every mile felt slower than the last, the silence thick enough to press against my chest. Somewhere in the distance, a shadow moved, just at the edge of my vision. I told myself it was a tree, a trick of the light. The hum of the engine was the only companion I had, vibrating through the seat, through my bones. But then the air shifted, colder, heavier, carrying a faint scent, metallic, like something decayed, something waiting. I thought I saw a figure step onto the asphalt, tall, thin, disappearing as quickly as I blinked. My heart caught a slow tightening in my chest, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. The radio flickered, static filling the car, whispering words I didn't understand. I gripped the wheel tighter, the fog wrapping around me, isolating me from the world. And that's when I saw it, standing on the side of the road, still watching a shadow that wasn't mine. I never should have taken this highway after dark. The highway stretched ahead, endless and pale beneath the dim glow of my headlights. Skeletal trees leaned over the asphalt, their branches scratching at the fog like long, dry fingers. The night smelled damp, earthy, and hollow. I drove slower. The fog pressed close to the windshield, soft and suffocating. Every shadow looked alive. There was a rustle from the shoulder. I blinked, trying to pierce the gray, but nothing stood still long enough to be certain. The smell of wet leaves filled the car, and something colder brushed my arm. I froze, not in fear exactly, more like curiosity, heavy and slow. A shadow moved just beyond the reach of the headlights. It didn't walk or run. It hovered, shifting in the fog. My fingers tightened on the wheel. I could feel a chill climbing my spine, brushing my neck with invisible fingers. The fog wrapped around the car, a soft, suffocating silence. I leaned closer to the window, trying to see. The headlights carved faint shapes from the mist. The trees seemed taller now, leaning closer, their roots like veins pressed into the dark soil. A low hum filled the air, almost beneath hearing. Maybe it came from the tires, maybe from the fog, or maybe it was the highway itself. I tried to shake it off, told myself it was just the wind. The fog moved differently here, though, curling around the trees and the road like it had purpose. Something moved again, this time closer. I felt in the brush against my arm, soft, insistent, almost apologetic. I didn't look. I couldn't. There's a stillness that falls when you know you're not alone, even if you can't see. The road narrowed. Each turn seemed to stretch farther, folding back on itself. I smelled wet wood and cold earth, smelled something faintly metallic. The trees whispered in the wind. Branches tapped against each other, small, precise sounds, like fingers counting. I imagined shapes behind the fog, faces pressed close to the glass, pale, staring, patient. A sudden chill made the hair on my arm stand up. I thought of reaching for the door handle, but the car felt heavier now, pressed down by silence, by fog, by waiting. The shadow stayed just beyond the light. Sometimes it seemed taller, sometimes smaller. I could feel its presence, leaning closer, brushing along the curve of my shoulder. The hum returned, low and vibrating, not from the car, not from anything mechanical. It filled my chest, slow and steady, like a heartbeat too deep to hear. I blinked. The fog thinned slightly, revealing a stretch of road lined with broken branches and decaying leaves. And then it thickened again, swallowing everything, softening the edges of the world. I breathed slowly. The rustling stopped. The shadow didn't move. Everything held its breath with me. I drove, not fast, not slow, just forward into the fog, where the trees leaned closer and hum wrapped around me like a shroud. I thought of stopping, of rolling the window down, letting the cold in, but I couldn't. The road called me forward, endless and forgotten. A soft brush ran along my arm again. I didn't flinch. I didn't turn. And then silence. The fog swallowed the shadow. The trees leaned back, still and skeletal. Even the hum faded, leaving only the faint, lonely whisper of the highway. I kept driving, because stopping would have been worse. And the The fog waited patiently, as though it had all the time in the world. The highway stretched thin under the pale wash of streetlights. Fog curled along the asphalt like smoke from a distant fire. Night had settled deep. The air smelled of wet gravel and cold metal. I had been driving for hours. Only the hum of tires against the road and my shallow breaths kept me company. Somewhere behind me, headlights flickered across the mist, then vanished. A figure appeared. At first, I thought it was a trick of the fog, a shadow stretching too far. But they stood there, still on the shoulder, thumb raised, pale, silent. My heart slowed. I watched. The fog seemed to gather around them, or maybe it was just me, imagining. Their eyes, I couldn't see, but I felt them pulling at the edges of my mind. I slowed the car. The tires whispered against wet asphalt. My hands tightened around the wheel, cold and clammy. No one else moved. The highway was empty behind them, empty in front. I blinked, and they were closer, or maybe I had drifted too near. The scent hit me first. Something like iron and cold rain, a smell that made the skin on my neck prickle. I swallowed. I wanted to speak, to ask if they needed help, but my throat was heavy, dry. Silence pulled around the car like a tide. When I glanced back again, they were gone, just gone. The fog hung in their place, thick, swallowing the shoulder hole. The air seemed to grow colder. Every breath I took felt sharp, shallow. The highway had widened, stretched into nothingness, and I was alone. A soft rustling grazed my ears. I turned instinctively. The trees leaned closer, branches scratching at the windshield. Was it the wind, or was it them? Just beyond the fog, watching, I drove on, slowly, carefully. Every reflection in the rear view seemed longer than it should be, darker. I thought I saw pale shapes shifting in the distance, vanishing when I blinked. The scent lingered, iron, wet stone, faint smoke. It clung to my clothes, to my hair, as if the figure had brushed past me without moving. I wanted to roll the windows up, lock the doors. I didn't. The radio was dead. No hum, no static, just silence pressing in, heavier than the night. I considered stopping, calling someone, anywhere, but the thought of leaving the car, of stepping into fog, made my chest tighten and a pair of headlights appeared far ahead, dim, unsteady. I thought relief would come, but as I drew closer, the shape of a car flickered, then faded. No wheels, no shape, just a pale glow hovering over the asphalt that I blinked. My pulse thrummed in my ears. The road seemed longer now, stretching farther than memory allowed. And always, always that scent, sharp, cold, impossible to place, lingering behind me that I thought about turning around, going back. The fog behind me swallowed the horizon. Nothing, no figure, no shadow, only emptiness that felt thick enough to choke on. I kept driving. Each mile was measured in silence. Each breath tasted faintly of iron. Then, a fleeting reflection in the side mirror. Just for a moment, pale, faceless, watching. I jerked the wheel slightly, heart hammering, eyes straining against the dark. But when I looked directly, the shoulder was empty, my thoughts fractured, splitting into whispers I could barely hear. Was it real? Or was it the highway, the fog, the long, lonely night playing tricks? I didn't want to know. Not really. The road curved. Streetlights flickered. Shadows pulled along the edges, long and thin, stretching toward me like reaching fingers. I felt them, I think, not moving, but always there, always waiting. I wanted to breathe, to relax, but my chest refused. I kept my hands on the wheel, knuckles pale, knuckles tight. Eventually, the fog thinned. The smell faded, though it lingered faintly in the corners of my mind. The highway opened into a stretch of ordinary light, yellow, warm, almost safe. And still I couldn't shake it. The sense that someone or something had ridden with me unseen just behind the veil of fog. That pale figure, thumb raised, waiting, disappearing. I parked at the next rest stop. Engine off, windows up, doors locked, and I waited. But nothing came, only the wind, and the faint, impossible memory of a scent that should not exist. The road was empty. Fog curled along the asphalt, soft and thick, like a slow breath. I leaned against the cold guardrail, metal biting through my jacket, and listened. At first, it was just a wind, a restless, sighing wind that rubbed across the trees and through the cracks in the pavement. But then, beneath it, there were words, faint, familiar, though I couldn't place them. Whispers curling like smoke around my thoughts. They felt like echoes of my own voice, or maybe memories I had buried too deep. I tried to step back, to pull away, but the words followed, soft, insistent, slipping between the fog and the night. They spoke in fragments, half-formed, a name, a laugh, a warning I almost remembered. Shadows leaned over the guardrail with me. Not quite people, not quite air. They bent unnaturally, stretching too long in the pale light of the street lamp. I could see them in the corner of my eyes, twisting when I blinked, gone when I looked straight. A cold breeze moved my hair across my forehead. I shivered, feeling it crawl down my neck, through my sleeves. It smelled like wet leaves and iron, like something left behind after rain. Hiding in the soil, breathing just beneath, the whispers grew clearer. Not loud, never loud, just urgent, each syllable pressing against my chest. I pressed my palms to the guardrail, trying to steady myself, trying to tell myself I was imagining it, but I wasn't. One voice, softer than the others, drifted closer. It sounded almost like me, or the part of me I had forgotten. It called a memory I tried to forget, a night where the air had smelled the same, where my footsteps had faltered along the asphalt, where I had chosen wrong. The fog thickened around my legs. It rose in slow fingers, brushing my shoes, crawling over the edge of the road. I could hear the asphalt hissing beneath it, wet from some unseen rain. A shadow moved just beyond the guardrail, stretching across the road, and I couldn't tell if it was one thing or many. I wanted to leave. I wanted to run and never look back. But the whisper followed, twisting through my ears, tugging at thoughts I had locked away. It was patient, like it had all night and maybe all time. The street lamp flickered. Each pause of light made the shadows stretch longer. I could see shapes leaning over the guardrail now, pressing against the fog, pale. Thin arms reaching down to the dark pavement, vanishing before I could understand them. I pressed my hand against my ears, but it didn't stop. The voice had slipped inside, brushing against my ribs and whispering my lungs. It wasn't words anymore. Not really. It was regret, curling like smoke, wrapping around my heart, and whispering things I didn't want to remember. I stepped back. The guardrail scraped my palms as I moved, cold and real. The whispers lingered. Even as I started down the road, the fog swallowing me, the words chased my heartbeat. I could feel them slipping under my skin, following every step. Somewhere behind me, a shadow stretched along the guardrail, unmoving, patient. The breeze carried it closer, brushing the back of my neck. I didn't look. I couldn't. The road curved into darkness. And still, I felt the words wrap around me. A faint sigh, a half-remembered laugh, a warning I almost ignored. I wanted to tell myself I was safe now, but the night had other plans. Even now, I can feel it. The whispers never left. They're just waiting, hiding in the fog, leaning against the guardrail, waiting for me to remember. The road was empty. Fog pressed against the headlights, thick and slow, swallowing the edges of the trees. I could see nothing past the pale glow ahead. The car behind me appeared first as a pair of dim lights. Then, when I shifted lanes, it moved too, careful, deliberate. It never got closer, never far enough to disappear. I told myself it was coincidence. But each turn I took, each curve I navigated, it matched me exactly, like a shadow riding the road. Rain began to patter lightly on the windshield. The hum of my tires over wet asphalt was louder now, a pulse against the silence, against the fog that seemed alive. I blinked and the tail lights glowed brighter, sharper, cutting through the mist, red reflections on the wet paint of the road. I felt a shiver crawl along my spine. Every so often, the trees leaned closer, branches scratching the roof, or maybe it was only the wind. I couldn't tell anymore. The world narrowed to 2 lanes, 2 sets of lights, one steady breathing. My hands gripped the wheel, knuckles pale. The car behind me was patient, never pressing, always waiting. I wanted to speed up, but my foot hesitated on the pedal, and when I did, it mirrored me perfectly. I passed a sign, half hidden in fog, letters faded, peeling. I couldn't read them clearly, yet the tail lights stayed there, red dots drifting like eyes. Sometimes I caught glimpses of shapes moving just beyond the fog, a figure crossing the road, or trees that bent impossibly. The headlights cut through them only briefly before swallowing them again. I tried turning off the road, a side street that curled into the dark. The tail lights followed, hesitant but relentless. I felt a presence, patient, silent, yet watching. My breath fogged the glass. I wiped it and saw the reflection. Not just mine. Something else lingered there, just behind. But when I looked back to the mirror, the seat was empty. I slowed, almost stopped. The fog thickened, pressing into the windows. The world was now just lights, mist, and my heartbeat thudding in the chest of the car. I remember the smell of wet asphalt mixed with something metallic, like rust on old nails left in the rain. The tail lights pulsed faintly, not a vehicle anymore, but something waiting. And then I noticed it. The rhythm, they never approached, never receded. Always 2 beats behind mine. Always the same. I blinked again. For a moment I was alone. No lights, no shadow, just fog curling like smoke and my own uneasy breath. But then a faint glow returned, a red glow in the distance. Not moving closer, not moving away. Just there. I drove until the road ended, and the fog lifted slightly at the edges. The car behind me vanished, as if it had never existed. Yet the sensation remained, a hollowing in my chest, a whisper I couldn't hear but felt. Alone, I parked under a weak street lamp. The light flickered, small shadows crawling along the asphalt, and in the quiet, I realized I had been watched all along, even when the eyes had disappeared. The mist curled around my tires. The world was soft now, but empty, and I knew, without turning back, that some things wait patiently, following the rhythm of your own steps, always just behind. The rest stop appeared through the fog like a pale memory. Its lights hummed softly, flickering against the damp asphalt. I parked, the tires hissing over puddles, and felt the chill pressed in my jacket. Inside, the air smelled of cold coffee and something faintly metallic. The vending machines glowed, their buttons blinking in uneven rhythm. Shadows stretched across the floor, long and thin, twisting over the tiles. I moved toward the restroom, boots tapping softly, echoing against the walls. The fluorescent lights buzz overhead, cutting through the foggy glow from outside. Each flicker made the shadows twitch. Something shifted near the snack aisle. I froze, a silhouette, pale and still, pressed against the edge of the vending machines. I told myself it was a trick of the light, but the shadows moved differently than the machines themselves. They lingered where there should have been nothing. The hum of the light seemed louder here, almost speaking in rhythm with my heartbeat. A soda can rattle somewhere behind the stalls. I swallowed, tasting the metallic edge of fear on my tongue. The floor felt cold through my soles, wooden spots. I could smell the fog creeping into the cracked doors, damp and earthy. My breath came shallow, visible in the pale, flickering glow. I walked toward the vending machines, each step deliberate. My hand brushed the cool metal. It was damp, a soft scraping echo behind me. I turned quickly. Nothing. The shadows clung to corners, stretching up the walls like thin fingers. I could sense them watching, even if I couldn't see their shape. The air grew heavier, like it had weight, pressing against my chest. The rest stop was empty, silent but for the hum and the occasional drip from a leaky pipe. I thought of the road behind me, empty, swallowing tires and headlights. And I knew, with a certainty that prickled my skin, that I was not alone. I tried to steady my breathing. The vending machines flickered again. In that instant, a shadow slid behind the snack aisle, just beyond the light's reach. I felt before I saw it, a presence pressing at the edge of perception. I stepped back, boots scraping softly over tiles. Something cold brushed my arm. I spun. Only air. The fluorescent hum shifted, as if whispering. I bent closer to machines, staring at my reflection in the glass. It flickered, distorted. For a heartbeat, It looked different. A soft scuff came from behind the stalls. I couldn't place a direction, couldn't see it. The fog from outside snuck in through the vents, curling across the floor in pale ribbons. The rest stop seemed to breathe with me, slow and deliberate. The shadows pooled near the bathrooms, thin and dark, curling over themselves. Something moved among them, silently, observing. I tried the restroom door. Locked. The lock rattled softly under my fingers, giving no reply. I felt a presence behind me again. The vending machine lights flickered violently, casting strobe-like shadows across the room. Each blink revealed nothing, but the feeling of eyes on me persisted, unblinking, patient. I took a step back, and then the silence thickened. The hum of the lights cut off suddenly. The rest stop fell into near darkness, save for a pale light spilling from the fog outside. I could hear soft footsteps, careful, deliberate, moving just beyond my vision. Closer, then still. My own breathing sounded loud. The air tasted metallic, thick with fear. I pressed my back against the vending machine, trying to blend into the flickering shadow. Then, slowly, the lights returned. The shadows had shifted. One lingered closer now, at the edge of the hallway, beyond the reach of the machines. I wanted to look, to move, to escape, but I couldn't. My legs refused. The shadow remained still, patient, waiting, and then the silence stretched longer than time should allow. The hum returned, soft, almost welcoming, as if nothing had happened. But I knew it had. I stepped toward the door, boots pressing wetly against the tiles. The shadow did not follow. Or maybe it did, silently. I left the rest stop, fog curling around the car like smoke. The lights behind me flickered one last time. I didn't look back. The road ahead was empty, but I could still feel it, watching, lingering just behind the edge of the light. The road was empty. Fog curled along the asphalt, soft and thick, swallowing the edges of my headlights. Night had fallen hours ago, though the sky still carried a pale, restless glow. I kept the radio low, mostly for company, mostly for silence. Static. It started small, a thin crackle beneath the hum of the engine, and then a word. My name. Soft. So soft I thought I imagined it. I blinked, trying to convince myself it was just the hum bending in the corners of my mind. Another whisper. Closer. It wasn't just the radio. It wasn't just the static. It knew me. The air in the car shifted. Cool, almost damp, pressing against my skin. I could smell the faint scent of rust and damp leather, mingling with the warm, stale breath of the heater. My heart started to drape itself in a slow, dragging rhythm. The words became clearer, slicing through the fog of thought. Memories I hadn't spoken aloud. Secrets I'd tucked in the back of my mind. Each whisper hit like a small pulse in my chest, as if the radio reached inside. I gripped the wheel. The hum deepened. A low, almost singing vibration that made the hairs on my arms stand on end. I pulled off the road. The tires whispered over gravel. Soft footsteps echoing in the night. I opened the door. The air was cold, smelling of wet earth and something faintly metallic, like old coins left in the rain. I stepped out. The radio, still inside, still alive, spilled its static into the empty world. My name again, and then a memory I thought I had buried. I felt it rise in my chest, a weight pressing against my ribs. I pressed my hand to it, but the hum just laughed quietly, vibrating under my skin. A shadow flitted past the passenger window, not moving like a person, not solid, just shifting. A pause, heavy and brittle, settled in the air. I wanted to look away, to breathe normally, but the whispers followed every movement of my eyes. They carried my childhood laughter, the way my mother used to call me from the kitchen, the hurt I'd felt the day I learned I could never go back. Static, my name. I stumbled back toward the car, hands brushing against the cold metal of the door. It hummed louder as I touched it, almost pleased, almost alive. I couldn't tell where the sound ended and the world began. The radio flickered, a pale light inside it, pulsing softly. I thought I saw a shape behind the dial, a pale outline, like smoke trying to take a familiar form. The wind picked up, rustling leaves, tapping branches, whispering across the roof of the car. I wanted to shout, to turn it off, to throw it away, but my name came again, velvet and unavoidable. Closer. I realized I had stopped moving. Time had folded around the hum. The night had thickened, pressing into the edges of my vision, pulling me toward the radio. A thought drifted through me, soft as fog. Maybe it didn't want to be turned off. Maybe it only wanted me. I leaned back into the seat. The whispering slowed. Not gone, just patient, waiting in the spaces between breaths. I could feel the hum vibrating through my bones, soft footsteps pacing inside my chest. I tried to focus on the fog outside, on the white gleam of the streetlight ahead. But the memory of my own name, spoken in the static, would not leave. It lingered, a shadow of breath against my ear. The engine ticked, cooling. I kept my hands on the wheel, though I didn't dare start the car. The night was long, and the hum, it waited with me, soft, unrelenting. And I understood, somewhere deep in the quiet, that some things do not let go, even when you are alone, even when the world outside has vanished into fog. The radio whispered again, my name, and I let it. It was just past midnight. Rain pressed against the windows, soft at first, then steady, like a distant drum. The diner was nearly empty. Only the hum of the fridge and the flickering neon sign outside kept me company. I went to the bathroom. The tiles were cold beneath my bare feet. The air smelled faintly of bleach, stale coffee, and the wet asphalt outside. I leaned over the sink. The mirror fogged, not from steam. I wiped a hand across it, and the haze remained thick, stubborn. Then I saw it, a shape behind me, pale, silent, standing too still, too close. I froze. I turned. Nothing, just the empty stall doors, the cracked tiles, the faint dripping from the sink. My breath came quick, misting in the dim light. The lights flickered. A low hum filled the room, soft, almost comforting, and then sharper. It wrapped around my chest, made my ears ache. I looked back at the mirror. The figure had returned. Or maybe it never left. Its eyes weren't eyes. They were hollow, like glass left out in the rain. I wanted to step back, but my shoes stuck to the tiles. The hum pulsed with my heartbeat. I could almost feel the shape behind me. Cold, empty, waiting, a drip of water from the faucet. Sounded like a gunshot. I flinched, then silence again. I reached for the door handle. It trembled in my hand. The mirror reflected only me. Or was it me? The edges of my reflection blurred, rippling like dark water. I blinked. The figure was gone. The hum softened, almost tender, whispering in a language I almost understood. But the mirror didn't clear. Fog swirled across its surface, curling in strange patterns, like smoke caught in sunlight. I leaned closer, fingers nearly touching the glass. For a second, I thought I saw something else. A hand, pale, delicate, hovering just behind mine. I jerked away. The mirror stayed fogged. The lights flickered again. The hum returned. And I felt it then, a brush of cold along my spine, soft as a sigh. I wanted to run, but the room felt smaller, the air thicker. I whispered to myself, though no words formed. I listened instead. The hum, the drip, the flicker, every small noise became a warning. I touched the mirror again. The glass was warmer than it should be, almost alive beneath my fingertips. I thought I saw my own face smiling back, but my lips weren't moving. And then a blink, and the smile was gone. I wanted the lights to stay on. I wanted the hum to leave. I wanted the figure to vanish completely, but none of it obeyed. I stepped back. The tiles were wet underfoot, rainwater tracking in from outside. The door seemed farther than it had been, like the room itself had stretched. I stayed there a long moment, listening, waiting. The hum receded slightly, retreating, but never gone. I left the bathroom slowly. The diner's lights flickered overhead, throwing pale, uneven shadows across the empty booths. The neon outside buzzed, casting a wet, cold glow across the floor. I glanced once at the bathroom door, and for just a heartbeat, I thought I saw a shape press against the glass, staring out at me. But when I blinked, it was gone. The rain tapped against the windows. The hum lingered, soft and low. I sat back at the counter. The world felt hollow, quiet in a way it hadn't before, and the mirror waited. The street was empty. Cold air pressed against my skin. I pulled my coat tighter, but it did little. A single street lamp flickered ahead. Its pale light wavered, shivering over the cracked pavement. Shadows stretched long and thin, curling at the base like fingers trying to grasp something. I slowed. Every step felt heavier. The hum of electricity hummed in my ears. Soft, constant, almost alive. It made my skin prickle. I stopped under the lamp. The light pulled around me, weak, uncertain. I leaned against the cold metal pole. Rust and dust clung to it, rough against my fingertips. The shadows moved. Not far, not fast, just shifting. They danced, stretching up, bending, reaching. I told myself it was nothing, but the feeling of being watched settled like fog in my chest. A breeze whispered across the street. Dry leaves scraped along the pavement. The smell of asphalt, damp and old, rose into my nose. It reminded me of empty nights I'd walked alone before. I stepped back. Footsteps? Soft. Almost nothing. Yet my heart tightened anyway. The lamp flickered again. Darkness slipped along its edges, crawling toward me. I blinked. Something lingered there. A shadow too still to belong to a tree or a signpost. A shape that hesitated, then vanished when I moved my head. I couldn't breathe. Not fully, not safely. The hum of the electricity grew louder in my chest. Or maybe it was inside me. A faint scratching sound scraped against the pavement. I froze. The shadows writhed at the base of the pole, closer now, but still nothing concrete, just the suggestion of movement. My hand itched to grip something, anything, but the air was thin, cold, silent, except for the hum and the rustling leaves. I thought about turning back. The street behind me vanished in fog, a gray, oily mist that smelled faintly of wet concrete and decay. I could feel it pressing against my face. A soft breath brushed my neck. Not mine. I spun. Empty street. The lamp above me flickered again, and then a pulse of light, and I saw it. Shadows converged at the lamp's base. They pooled together, curling inward like black smoke settling. Not moving, but alive, watching. I could feel them in the pit of my stomach. I swallowed. The hum became a low vibration in my bones. The air around me thickened. My fingers tingled. The shadows did not retreat. I told myself I was imagining it. I always imagined things. But the night smelled different here. Darker, older. A faint click echoed from the lamp. The light dimmed, then returned, weaker than before. A single hairline crack in the glass caught the glow, splitting it into jagged shards. It felt like eyes staring, judging. I stepped away, but the street felt longer now. The fog wrapped around my legs, soft and sticky. The shadows stretched toward me again, not moving fast, but relentless. I wanted to run, but my feet were heavy, concrete pressing against my soles like lead. The lamp hummed louder, and I realized it wasn't just the electricity. It was the silence around it, the silence that waited. I leaned against a wall nearby, heart hammering, breath shallow. The shadows twisted one last time. A pale light flickered through them, and I thought I saw a face. Just for a moment, gone before I could focus. I didn't stay to see more. I walked quickly then, but the hum followed. Every step echoed. Every shadow lingered a beat too long. Even now, when I close my eyes, I feel the lamp, its weak glow, the twisting shadows, the soft hum vibrating just beneath the skin. I feel them watching, waiting, patient. And I wonder if anyone else ever notices it. Or if I was meant to be the only one standing under a broken street lamp, alone with shadows that never truly leave. The rain had softened to a steady drizzle, each drop sliding down the asphalt in quiet rivulets. Streetlights glimmered, their pale halos distorted by the wet sheen of the road. I kept walking, my coat heavy, soaked through, smelling of damp earth and cold metal. Somewhere behind me, a rhythm, soft, careful, matching my steps. I told myself it was another late walker, lost, maybe scared by the dark. But the road stretched empty, glistening and deserted. The trees along the roadside swayed gently, their long shadows reaching twisting across the street. I thought I saw shapes curling in the spaces between them, a reflection of branches, or something else. Waiting to lean closer, my breath came shallow, misting in the chill. Every step I took, another footfall followed. I paused. The echo stilled. I stepped again. There was precise, almost mocking. Closer, always closer. Puddles reflected the sky like shattered mirrors. I imagined faces flickering in their ripples, pale and wet, watching me without blinking. The asphalt smelled of rain, asphalt, and something older, like a faint smoke lingering from a fire I could not see. I tried quickening my pace. The footsteps kept pace, faster, then slower, waiting for me to stumble, waiting for me to look back. I glanced over my shoulder. Nothing but fog rolling low across the street, swallowing the nearest trees. Even the streetlights flickered, as though the shadows were thirsty for light. I remembered every quiet step I had taken in life, the ones I regretted. Every decision I whispered to myself at night. The footsteps behind me felt like them, reminding me, punishing me. The rain blurred the world, and my hands were slick on the straps of my bag. The sound of the droplets hitting the road mixed with the faint, dragging rhythm behind me. Sometimes I thought I heard whispers, soft, almost a sigh, rising with the mist. A street lamp buzzed and went dark, leaving a stretch of the road in near-complete shadow. I froze. My heart pulsed in my ears louder than the drizzle. The footsteps stopped too. Silence. Thick, expectant, smelling of wet leaves and rust. I took a step forward. Then another. Then I felt it, too close, a weight in the air, heavy, pressing against the back of my neck, a presence that made my skin crawl, hair prickling under the damp cold. My eyes darted through the fog. The shadows from the trees stretched longer, bending unnaturally, like fingers reaching. Something moved in the periphery, slower than walking, too deliberate to be wind. I tried speaking, a soft, trembling murmur. No answer. Just a quiet hum of rain, and a distant splash of tires on wet road somewhere far away. But I could feel it there, always there. I wanted to run, but my legs felt rooted in the slick asphalt. Every instinct told me to flee, yet every step forward drew the footsteps closer, sharper, more certain. It was as if the road itself were alive, keeping time with the one behind me. Puddles reflected shadows that were not mine, long shapes, pale, hovering just out of reach. I reached down to touch the wet ground. Cold, solid, yet the reflection in the water shifted when I blinked, a soft distortion that made my stomach twist. The drizzle eased, and the world grew quieter. I thought I had lost it, but then I heard it, just behind me, almost against my ear, the softest of steps, a whisper of motion. I didn't turn. I couldn't. I walked on. The fog began to lift, revealing the road stretching ahead, empty again. The trees receded, shadows retreating, but the memory of their reach lingered on my skin. A chill rode down my spine, lingering, settling into my bones. By the time I reached the end of the street, the footsteps had vanished. The rain slowed, droplets clinging to my hair, my coat. I was alone. But even now, when the night is quiet and the world smells of wet asphalt and cold rain, I hear them, soft footsteps matching mine. Always behind me, the highway stretched endless under a pale, washed-out sky. Fog clung to the asphalt like a damp blanket. I could feel it seeping to the car's edges, cold and slow. The hum of the engine filled the space between my thoughts. It was steady, almost hypnotic. I kept glancing at the lanes ahead, watching my tires swallow the faint lines. Then I caught them. Eyes, pale, floating just above the rearview mirror. I blinked. Gone. I told myself it was the fog, the reflection of the pale dawn. But my chest tightened. Every time I glanced, there they were again, watching. The radio droned softly, static under soft music. I reached to turn it off. Nothing changed. The hum remained. The eyes remained. Rain began, first a drizzle, then a slow, persistent tapping against the windshield. Each drop vibrating through the glass. I tried to focus on the road. Tires hissed over slick black streaks, carrying a rhythm that matched my heartbeat. But the rear view held me. I could see the shape of them now. Not human, not quite shadow, not quite light. Just eyes, pale and empty, floating behind me. I swallowed. The car felt smaller, suddenly tighter. The fog pressed against the glass, and I could almost smell it, damp, earthy, unwelcoming. A soft rustle brushed my shoulder. I jolted. The air tasted cold, metallic, like distant lightning before a storm. The road bent sharply. My hands gripped the wheel. I told myself the eyes were gone, blinking, vanishing. But then, in the corner of the mirror, movement. A pale face, too close, too still. I blinked, and it was gone. Or maybe it never moved at all. I couldn't tell. The fog swirled, folding into itself. The hum in the engine throbbed against my temples. I tried to hum along, softly, quietly. It didn't help. The reflection returned. A figure this time. Long, pale fingers brushing the inside of the windshield. Soft, almost hesitant. I looked away, focused on the yellow lines. The rain made them blur. The tires hissed again. The car trembled lightly, though the road was straight. I dared another glance. The figure lingered, but now behind the mirror itself. Outside? Inside? I could not tell. The air smelled of wet asphalt and something faintly sweet, like old flowers left too long. The fingers pressed and the eyes watched. I spoke, but only in whispers. Go away. Nothing responded. I blinked again. The eyes vanished, leaving the fog, the hum, the rain. I drove for miles. Miles I cannot remember clearly. The fog never lifted. The hum never ceased. Sometimes I thought I saw pale shapes dancing just beyond the windshield, teasing the corners of my vision. Headlights appeared in the distance. Other cars. I followed them blindly. The pale eyes stayed behind me. Always. No matter how fast I drove, how many lanes I passed. They waited. At a rest stop, I parked. The fog rolled through the lot like a silent tide. I opened the door. The air was thick, still. I listened. Nothing but my breath, uneven. Soft footsteps behind me. Maybe my own. I dared not look back. When I finally peeked into the rear view, empty, no eyes, no hands, only my pale reflection, trembling under the soft overhead light. I left the rest stop slowly, cautiously. The highway was open. The rain softened. The fog thinned. But sometimes at night, when the hum of the engine is low and the headlights blur in wet asphalt, I see them again. Pale eyes, just beyond the mirror, watching, waiting, always behind me. The night was thick with fog. Streetlights cut pale lines through the mist, fading quickly into gray. I drove slowly, the tires humming against the wet asphalt. The car smelled of rust and cold metal. It smelled like something had been here long before me, like it had been waiting. I felt it the first time at a curve, a weight on the seat beside me. Not heavy, not solid, but enough to make the air denser. I glanced sideways. Nothing, only the faint fog pressing against the windows. The headlights illuminated drifting leaves that bounced like soft whispers along the road. The brush of breath grazed the back of my neck. I froze. Cold, dry. It didn't move like a person. Not quite, more like a shadow brushing across my skin. My hands tightened on the wheel. I tried to convince myself it was a draft, the hum of the heater, the car settling. But the scent of rust lingered, a bitter tang that clung to my throat. Each mile felt longer than the last. I passed familiar houses, dark, still silent, but the fog made them strange. Walls and windows stretched into gray shapes that whispered along with the trees. The weight shifted again. Closer now, a presence that didn't breathe, but somehow did. I imagined it leaning, its shoulder brushing mine, its cold breath hovering just behind my ear. I tried the radio. Nothing but static, buzzing faintly, a hollow hum that seemed to match the rhythm of my heart. I turned it down. Even silence felt too loud. My reflection in the side mirror seemed delayed. For a second, it wasn't mine. The eyes in the glass blinked slower, and the shadow behind them lingered longer. I looked back at the seat. Empty, but the air between us trembled. I remembered the last time I'd felt it, years ago. In another car, another night, another road with a fog pressed against my face. It had been the same then. Silent, patient, like a cold hand settling over my shoulder. I passed under an overpass. The hum of tires echoed, bouncing back in long, hollow waves. The seat beside me dipped slightly. I leaned away, heart shallow, but the weight didn't leave. It pressed, soft but unyielding, like it was carved from the darkness itself. A light flickered in the distance. Headlights approaching, warm and solid. I exhaled slowly, hoping it would be enough to shatter whatever this was. It didn't move. It didn't care. I slowed. Every shadow along the roadside seemed alive, branches scraping metal against metal, wind whispering secrets I didn't want to hear. The brush of breath returned. Closer. Warm, yet impossible. I smelled rust again. I could almost feel the cold prickle of skin on skin. Though I knew no one was there, I whispered to myself, told myself it was imagination, the pressure of being alone, the fog playing tricks. But even as I spoke, I felt it lean, light, weightless, and somehow heavier than the car itself. I reached the stop sign. Headlights behind me dimmed, then vanished. I stayed in the quiet, the hum of the engine like a heartbeat. The seat beside me was empty, but the air tasted of rust and something older, and I knew I was not alone. The road stretched ahead, endless and gray. I drove. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. Every time I thought I might be free, the brush of breath returned, soft as a sigh, cold as a forgotten grave. The fog swallowed the edges of the world. I could see only the pale light spilling onto wet asphalt, the car, the seat beside me, and the weight that would not lift. I slowed again, closing my eyes for a heartbeat, listening. Nothing moved, nothing breathed, but the rust lingered, the cold pressed against my neck, and I realized, as I always did, that some passengers never leave. I drove on, the road bending endlessly into mist. An invisible weight leaned closer. I smelled rust again, and I knew, somehow, I would feel it for the rest of the night. The fog had settled thick over the highway, white and quiet, stretching beyond the reach of my headlights. Every signpost looked the same. Mile marker 13 came into view, alone, its metal post pale against the haze. I slowed. The road beneath my tires hummed, low and hollow. Something crouched there, just under the marker, too dark to see clearly. My pulse thudded in my ears, a rhythm I could almost count. Almost. I wanted to drive past. I did, and yet the feeling followed me, sticky as cold sweat on my arms. The shadow stayed, or maybe it moved with me. Impossible to tell. I told myself it was fog playing tricks. My hands gripped the wheel tighter. The air smelled of wet asphalt and something sour, faintly metallic. The fog seemed to breathe with me. I glanced in the rearview mirror. Nothing, but a flicker just at the edge of the glass made my stomach flip. The headlights caught it briefly. A crouched shape, unnervingly still, just beyond the marker, its edges blurred like water over stone. I tried to focus on the road, tried to tell myself it was a trick of light. The hum of the tires against the pavement felt louder than it should, a static under my skin, a flicker of movement, a rustle in the fog. I blinked, and the shadow seemed closer. Or maybe my heart had just sped up. Every mile marker after 13 felt wrong. Too pale, too perfect, too quiet. The fog clung to the edges of the road, curling around the tires, whispering. I wanted to leave it behind, to tell myself it was imagination. And yet, I couldn't shake the sensation of eyes, watching, patient, curious, maybe. The highway stretched endlessly. Lines faded into gray. Streetlights, when they appeared, were weak, flickering, pale, each one a spotlight on nothing. I stopped at a small rest area. The asphalt was slick with condensation. The silence pressed in. I could hear my own breathing, ragged, and something else, a soft rustling, just beyond the mist. I told myself to wait, to breathe, to make sense of what I'd seen. The shadow crouched beneath mile marker 13. But now, I couldn't tell if I had seen it, or if it had always been there. A faint hum came from the fog. Not the tires, not the wind. A vibration low in the chest, soft under my ribs. I imagined it moving closer. I wanted to look back, but the rear view mirror showed only fog. Empty highway. I kept telling myself that. The fog shifted again. Something scraped the pavement. Soft, deliberate. I blinked, and the shadow was gone. The marker remained. Cold metal, pale and unyielding. Yet the emptiness felt wrong. Dense. Watching. I drove on, slower than before. Every mile seemed to stretch longer. The fog thickened. My pulse slowed, then quickened, then slowed again. I knew I wouldn't return. Not at night. Not when the fog is heavy. And not when mile marker 13 waits alone. The hum followed me for miles. Or maybe it was in my chest. Either way, it didn't stop. When the fog finally thinned, the road seemed normal again. The world smelled of damp earth and distant pine. Yet, somewhere beneath the surface, I knew the shadow crouched. Watching, waiting. Mile marker 13. A place you pass, but never truly leave behind. The fog lay heavy over the road, curling between the trees like pale smoke. It muffled everything, my footsteps, the wind, even the distant hum of the city. I felt smaller here, swallowed by the gray that pressed close. The radio sat on the passenger seat, old and humming. Static shimmered through it. Soft at first, almost gentle. Then the hum stretched into whispers, broken syllables, fragments I almost understood. A name, maybe mine. I blinked. Nothing was there. The shapes started at the edge of my vision. Shadows that weren't quite shadows, moving like smoke against the fog. A figure paused near a tree, then stretched and dissolved. My pulse thudded in rhythm with the radio's pulsing static. I leaned closer to the dashboard. The whispers grew sharper, though still hollow. It wasn't language. Not really. Just the feel of words scraping inside of my skull. The tires hummed softly on wet asphalt. A light shimmered through the fog. Pale, unsteady, hovering. It wasn't a street light. It wasn't the moon. I reached for the radio. Fingers trembling, brushing dust and cold metal. The static sank into the car, like water seeping through cracks. I could smell it, ozone like before a storm. A rustling in the seat behind me. I hadn't been alone. The fog thickened, pressing against the windows. I thought I saw faces there, shifting in the gray. Blinking didn't help. They were always at the periphery. I stopped breathing, and the whispers grew louder. Or maybe that was my imagination. The radio's pulse became heartbeat-like, slow, deliberate, dragging. I leaned closer, willing myself to listen. Words surfaced, jagged and fleeting. Don't stay here. I shook my head. Nothing. The shapes moved faster now, brushing the edges of the car. Cold touched my neck, my arms, my legs. A presence behind me that wasn't quite human. I told myself it was fog. It wasn't fog. I tried to turn the radio off. The dial spun freely, stubborn. The whispers continued, urgent and incoherent, climbing into my ears. I wanted to scream, but my voice was gone. Outside, something dragged across the ground. A slow, deliberate scratch, like claws over concrete. I pressed my hands to my ears. The radio thrummed beneath my palms, a vibration that shook my chest. I dared to look into the fog again. A figure, or maybe a bundle of shapes, drifted between the trees. It didn't move naturally, more like the fog itself had taken shape. The edges shimmered and blurred. I blinked. Gone. Cold sweat ran down my back. The radio pulsed once more, louder this time, echoing in my skull. Static spiked. Words clawed their way out. "You here alone?" I wanted it to stop. It wouldn't stop. I realized the car was moving on its own. Not fully. Just enough that the fog swirled around the tires. My hands were frozen on the wheel. The shadows leaned closer, hugging the edges of the fog. A soft footstep behind the seat. Closer. Near. I could feel the brush of something. Light, insubstantial, yet impossible. The whispering filled the air, drowning the hum of the engine. I shut my eyes. The static softened, becoming lullaby-like, not comforting, menacing in its quiet. The shapes faded into gray, but the feeling of being watched remained. A hush that pressed on my chest, slow and heavy. The radio finally fell silent. I didn't dare move. The fog thinned just enough to reveal the road ahead. Empty. Still. I exhaled without realizing I had been holding my breath. The car felt warmer suddenly, my own heartbeat loud in my ears. I glanced back at the seat behind me. Nothing, just fog clinging to the edges of the windows. The road stretched ahead, unbroken, but I knew the fog wasn't gone. It waited, soft and patient, just beyond sight. And the radio was never really off. I kept driving, slowly, quietly, hoping the whispers wouldn't follow, hoping the shapes had nowhere to cling. And yet, in the corner of my vision, I thought I saw movement, a soft shadow, slipping between the fog, just out of reach. The night was thick with fog, curling along the empty highway like smoke. My hands gripped the wheel, knuckles white, as the tires hummed over wet asphalt. Streetlights flickered, pale and uneven, leaving long stretches of shadow between each pool of light. I was alone. The hum of the engine filled the space between thoughts. Each breath came slower, heavier, as if the fog was pressing against my chest. Then headlights, brighter than anything I had ever seen. Blinding. I squinted, instinctively turning my head, but the light burned my eyes. A truck. It appeared in my lane, massive, unyielding, silent except for the soft growl of its engine. I blinked. It was gone. Nothing. Empty road stretching ahead, mist curling over the asphalt. Only the lingering scent of oil and cold metal clung to the air, sharp and cloying, curling under my nose. I forced my pulse down, telling myself it was a trick. Fog. Headlights reflecting off wet roads. My eyes playing games. But the smell lingered. I could still feel it in the back of my throat, the metallic tang of it, and the memory of those headlights, too bright, too close, burning into my vision, even with them gone. I slowed. The wheels hissed on wet tarmac. My own breathing sounded too loud. The fog wrapped tighter, pressing against the windshield, hiding the road ahead. A shadow moved at the edge of my vision. Or maybe it was nothing. The highway had its ghosts. I had driven this stretch alone for years, but tonight felt different. Every reflective sign, every wet curve of metal on the road, seemed to shift just as I looked away. A truck could have been there, or it could have been only me, imagining it, conjuring from the hum and fog. I closed my eyes for a second. The image of the truck burned behind my lids. A massive frame, white headlights like knives. It had no sound, no shape, and yet it had pressed against my chest like a weight I couldn't shake. I remembered the last time I had seen that road empty. I had driven it thinking it was safe, familiar. Now, every line on the asphalt seemed alien, like it had shifted while I wasn't looking. The scent returned. Oil, cold metal. It filled the cabin, wrapping around my skin, lingering under my nails. I breathed through my mouth, trying to push it away, but it stayed, curling in the corners of the car like smoke that wouldn't vanish. I blinked. The headlights had not returned, but the feeling of being watched did. Not outside, not in the mirrors. Inside, breathing with me, waiting. I touched the rear view. Nothing, just my reflection, pale in the dim dash light, but I could still feel it. A presence, passing through me in soft waves. My eyes traced the fog again. Empty, and yet in the empty, something moved. Something that shouldn't have been able to move. A memory hit me. The truck, the way it appeared and vanished, like a mark left on the world. Only visible when I blinked. It didn't belong here. Or maybe it belonged only to me. I slowed more. The engine's hum now a low whisper. I wanted to pull over, open the door, and let the fog swallow me. But the road stretched on, endless and uncertain. Another blink. The fog thickened, clinging to my headlights. Nothing moved. Nothing came. And yet the scent stayed. Oil and coal metal. Lingering. Waiting. I pressed the pedal lightly. Wheels hissed. Engine hummed. And the road carried me forward, empty and endless, with the memory of the truck chasing every turn. A soft rustle of air followed me, unnoticed at first, growing louder in the silence. A reminder of the thing that had been there, or the thing I imagined. By the time the fog began to thin, the scent had faded, but the weight of it lingered, pressing against my chest, whispering of a lane where something had been, and something had vanished. I blinked, and the highway was empty again. The air was heavy with the scent of damp earth and pine. A fog curled low between the trunks, pale and slow, swallowing the path I walked. My boots pressed into soft moss, each step a small, wet crunch. The pines whispered above me, not with wind. Something deeper, shifting, as if the branches were breathing. I stopped. The fog thinned, just enough to catch a movement, a shadow slipping between two trunks. I held my breath. The smell of resin was sharp now, bitter, clinging to my throat. The rustling continued, soft, deliberate, always just beyond sight. My hands brushed the bark of a tree, rough and cold. It shivered under my fingers. I thought it was me moving too fast, but then a branch quivered overhead. No wind. The path wound tighter here. Roots twisted up like old veins. Every crackle underfoot echoed through my chest, thumping against ribs I could feel, but not see. I kept walking, slowly, careful not to sound alive. The fog grew thicker again. It hugged my shoulders, chilled the back of my neck. The scent of pine sharpened, almost sweet now, sticky in the air. Something shifted again, a pale shape slipping between trunks, its movement too fluid to be animal. I pressed my palm to my mouth. The sound of my own breathing seemed loud. And then another sound, soft footsteps. Not mine, matching mine. I dared to glance behind me. Nothing, only the fog and the dark shapes of the trees. A pine needle fell on my shoulder. I froze. The rustling stopped. For a moment. The world was only fog and silence, and the faint hum in my chest from the echoes of steps that weren't mine. I tried to keep moving, one foot in front of the other. The path curved sharply. Branches scraped my arms, leaving thin, wet streaks on my skin. I thought about turning back, but I knew the feeling would follow me. Always, a sharp scent of something metallic hit me. I looked down. Nothing on the ground, only brown needles and damp moss. Yet the smell lingered, sticky and thick. I swallowed it down, and the air seemed colder after. A pine cone dropped from high above, bouncing once on the earth. I jerked, heart hammering. The rustling started again, low, patient, circling around me, as if the trees themselves were alive and breathing. I pressed my back against the trunk. Rough bark bit my palms. I could hear the whisper of needles being pushed aside, soft movements weaving through the forest like invisible hands. The fog parted a little. A faint, pale light spilled through the canopy. Not sun, not moon, something else. It trembled on the edges of my vision. I wanted to run, but running would make noise. And the footsteps, I could feel them now, brushing against the edges of the fog, matching my pace, never quite in front, never behind. I stepped into a small clearing. Needles matted the earth underfoot, damp and fragrant. The air was unnaturally still here. Not a sound, except for the faint echo of the steps that weren't mine. I knelt to touch the ground. Cold, moist, smells of pine and decay mingled together. I felt eyes, though I knew there was no one. They weren't human, never human. A whisper, maybe just in my head, maybe real, curled around me. It smelled like wet pine and old earth. I don't remember words, only the feeling of being watched, and the slow, deliberate rustling, always circling, never stopping. The clearing narrowed. Fog swirled up like a tide. Branches bent in impossible angles, brushing against my face, leaving scratches that burned faintly. I crouched low, listening, waiting. For what? I did not know. The footsteps stopped. The rustling ceased. The forest held its breath. I stayed still, pressed against the damp bark. The hum of the unseen pressed into my ears. Every shadow seemed to move when I blinked, and then, slowly, the fog began to thin. Light grew pale and thin, as though the forest was exhaling. I moved, careful, quiet, 1 foot at a time. Each step measured against the echo of those invisible footsteps. When I finally reached the edge of the pines, the fog retreated behind me. Branches swayed softly. A single pine cone rested at my feet, cracked open. The smell of pine lingered, cold and wet. A memory pressed against my skin. I didn't look back. Not once, but I could still feel it. The rustling, always just beyond the trunks. The overpass smelled of damp asphalt and cold metal. Fog curled low along the guardrails, softening the harsh lines of the city below. My boots echoed lightly against concrete, swallowed quickly by the silence. I passed it first without thinking. A shadow leaned over the railing, not moving, just there. The air thickened, taste sharp and wet on my tongue. I blinked, and it was still, or maybe it had never moved at all. The hum of the highway dimmed behind the fog. Tires rolling over steel bridges sounded distant, like some other world. My chest tightened. My breath came shallow, mist curling around my face. I stopped, even from the edge of the walkway. I could feel it watching. It didn't shift. It didn't breathe. Yet the presence pressed in, a weight against my ribs, cold as the metal railing beneath my fingers. A car passed far below, headlights slicing through the fog. For a heartbeat, I thought I saw its shape reflected there, slender, dark, bending in the pale light. Then it was gone. I took a step forward. The fog thickened, muffling the world to a dull, gray hum. Something whispered, maybe the wind, maybe something else, but it was a voice that made my skin prickle. I wanted to leave. Every instinct told me to turn and run back down the overpass stairs. But the shadow it drew me, it wasn't human. Not exactly. The shape was wrong, stretching just beyond the edge of sight, dissolving at the corners. It seemed to breathe with the mist, inhaling the fog, exhaling darkness. I pressed my hands to the railing, fingertips cold, static prickled over my arms, like tiny pinches of ice. And then I realized I couldn't feel the fog the same way near it. The air was heavier, thicker, almost viscous. A soft shuffling behind me. I whipped around. Nothing. Only my own heart hammering, each beat echoing too loudly in the stillness. The shadow shifted then, ever so slightly. It didn't turn its head. It didn't move its arms. Just leaned further, a subtle motion that sent shivers down my spine. I tried to look away, but my eyes kept returning. Curiosity tangled with fear, sticky as the damp fog around us. I felt its gaze on my back, even when my head was turned toward the empty walkway. A bus rumbled underneath the overpass. The vibration ran up through the concrete, rattling my teeth. The shadow didn't flinch. It didn't acknowledge it. It just stayed, waiting in the pale light and mist. I wanted to speak, just a word, something to confirm it was real, or that I was, but my throat tightened. Silence pressed against my ears. A faint smell of rust, iron and whetstone, lingered close. It wrapped around me, curling into the nape of my neck, and I realized the highway hum hadn't returned. Everything else, the wind, the cars, the distant city lights, had fallen away. I stepped backward, careful, slow. The shadow remained, unwavering, and yet I felt it tilt slightly, like a question, a subtle acknowledgement. Then it was gone. Or maybe I moved too quickly. Fog swallowed the space where it had leaned. The railing was empty. The night resumed its hum, low and distant, as though it had never paused. I stayed at the edge for a long time, breath slow, fingers still gripping the railing. Something lingered in my chest, a quiet dread or wonder I couldn't name. The fog rolled thicker now. I left the overpass without another glance, but the memory of that shadow followed. Even when I walked through the city streets, even when the world felt warm again, it lingered. A pale weight pressing behind my eyes, quiet, patient, waiting. The road was empty. Fog clung low to the asphalt, cold and damp. My headlights caught something at the edge of the tree line. A cabin, small, weathered, almost swallowed by shadow. The kind of place that waits. I slowed. The wind rattled the wooden panels. Each gust made the doors groan. A soft complaint carried across the quiet. I didn't know why I stopped. Something in the hollowness of it called. Soft curiosity or something sharper, quieter. The door was cracked. A sliver of pale light leaked through the gap. I pressed my hand to the cold wood. Inside, the air smelled of dust, of old earth, of decay that had settled into the floorboards and walls. It rose slowly, curling around my throat, thickening the silence. I swallowed, tasted it. Shadows pulled in corners. They moved with the faint stir of the wind. It was like the house breathed. Slow, shallow, watching. I stepped forward. The floor creaked beneath my weight, each plank announcing me. I wanted to stop, but my feet carried me anyway. A chair tipped over in the far corner. I hadn't touched it. The sound lingered in the air like a whispered warning. Cobwebs brushed my face as I moved. The air was cooler here, damp, soft, distant rustling from somewhere above. I tried to focus on the walls. Peeling wallpaper, pale from sun long gone. Stains that looked almost like faces. Blinking when I didn't want them to. The wind slipped through broken windows, carrying the smell of wet pine and mold. It pushed against me, urging me deeper. And the shadows, they shifted as I walked, curling along the beams. There was a table, half buried under dust. A single mug sat on it, tilted, as if someone had just left. I reached for it, cold, porcelain biting my fingers. Empty. I heard a footstep, soft, careful. I froze. My own heart sounded louder than it should. Another step, closer, but no one was there. Only the wind, only the house, only the soft groan of doors that hadn't moved in years. A window rattled violently, and the shadows flinched with it. Something low, wet, whispered behind the walls. I couldn't make words of it, only the pull of something unseen, pressing at my senses. I walked to the back. The cabin smelled stronger now, the scent of wet wood and rot, and something older, waiting. A corner of floor sagged under my weight. I looked down. Nothing but shadow. But the cold came up through my shoes, up my legs. Prickling, the ceiling above me shifted. Soft scraping, like claws on wood. I want to call out, but my mouth was dry. I stepped back. The door I had entered through was no longer fully in view. The cabin stretched, or maybe I had shrunk. Everything felt slightly wrong. I pressed my palm against the wall. Rough, splintered, and I felt it vibration. Not from me, not from the wind. Something beneath, moving slowly in rhythm with the house. I breathed shallow. It was easier to think in the corners, in the small patches of pale light, but the corners seemed restless now. A shadow lingered, darker than dark, just beyond the reach of sight. I tried to leave. The door was where I remembered, but something held it. Not a hand, not a body, just resistance. Heavy, patient, aware. I leaned against it. Nothing. And then the wind stilled. The cabin exhaled. I stepped back. The shadows slinked toward me, slowly, deliberately, not rushing, not loud, just close enough to feel cold across my skin. The air thickened again. Every breath tasted like earth and metal and dust. I realized I was listening too hard. Even my heartbeat sounded wrong here. Too loud, too permanent. I turned to the corner one last time. The shadow had formed something, barely there, only a suggestion, and then it was gone. Silence swallowed the room. I left the door. It creaked open without effort this time. Outside, the fog waited. The road was still empty, but the cabin remained. Silent, waiting, patient. I walked on, and the memory of soft footsteps followed me. The road was empty. Fog draped over fields, heavy and damp, swallowing the edges of the trees. My boots pressed into soft mud, each step quiet, but not quiet enough. I thought I heard rustling, a soft padding, closer than the wind. Then, just ahead, it appeared. A dog. Stray. Thin, its fur matted in the damp air. It emerged from a gray, low and silent, like it had always belonged there. Its eyes caught the faint streetlight, or maybe the moon, glowing pale, almost too white be real. I stopped. It stopped. The air between us thickened, charged with something I didn't want to name. It ran alongside me, legs skimming the ground with impossible quiet. I could feel its pace and the vibration through the earth. A warmth brushed my calf as it passed, but it didn't touch me. The fog grew heavier. It swallowed the road, and the trees became tall shadows. I tried to speak, my voice cracking like thin ice, but nothing came. The dog tilted its head, eyes locked onto mine. A flicker of understanding, or was it accusation? I couldn't tell. A chill crept up my spine, sharp and sudden. Then it stopped. Right there. The mist curled around its legs, wrapping it in gray silence. I expected a bark. Anything. Nothing came. Its eyes were still bright. Too bright. They shone like pale lanterns in the fog. Holding me, warning me, mocking me. I wanted to move. I couldn't. My feet felt glued to the wet ground, mud seeping through my shoes, cold and heavy. I wanted to reach out, to touch it, to anchor it to this world. But the fog moved first. It swallowed the dog hole. Gone. I stumbled forward, heart hammering, breath fogging in the night. The road was empty again. No footprints, no paw prints, just a lingering cold where it had stood. The silence pressed in. Even the wind seemed to avoid me, holding its breath. I could still see its eyes, pale and accusing, burned into the corners of my mind. I remembered the warnings I never listened to. The old man at the diner, shaking his head when I laughed. Some things follow, he said. I had thought of ghosts or bad luck or maybe my imagination. Now I understood. The path ahead twisted into nothing. Trees leaned in, branches scraping the fog like claws. Each step forward felt heavier, as if the dog's gaze was pressing down from behind. I glanced back. Nothing, but the sense of being watched didn't fade. The road narrowed. Mud clung to my ankles. The air smelled of wet earth and decay, faintly metallic, like rusted wire in the rain. Every now and then, I caught a whisper in the wind, too soft to understand, but clear enough to feel. It was waiting just beyond the fog. A shadow shifted behind the mist. I thought I saw legs, thin and quick, moving just out of focus. But when I blinked, there was nothing. I told myself it was gone. The dog had vanished. Yet I knew it hadn't. Its eyes, pale, patient, lingered in memory, staring from the edges of the fog, from the cracks between tree trunks, from the dark spaces in the corners of my mind. I had no name for it, no place to put it, only the regret. The way I had ignored the stray signs, the way I had laughed at warnings, the way I had let it run alongside me without ever thinking it could leave more than footprints. I reached the bend in the road. The fog thinned slightly, but the chill stayed. A soft breeze lifted the hair on my arms, carrying the faintest hint of wet fur. I turned, half expecting to see it again. Nothing. Still, I felt its absence pressing close, a tail brushing my thoughts, cold and quiet. I walked on. The mist followed, and I knew I would never be alone on this road again. The night had settled like a wet cloth over the road. Fog rolled in from the trees, thick and slow, curling around the tires of my car. I sat in the driver's seat, hands resting on the wheel, watching my own breath fog the windshield. The hum was there first. Low, soft, almost pleased. I thought it was the engine at first. But the car was off, completely still. I leaned closer to the glass. My breath fogged the edges, forming tiny rivers that trickled down. And then I noticed it, another fog moving against the warmth of my own, cold, curling along my neck. Fingers of ice brushing my skin through my sweater. I swallowed. Nothing. No one. Just the fog, breathing with me. The hum thickened. It was alive. Not the car, not the road, not the trees. It was something inside the car. Or something that had been waiting. The windshield clouded more. Shapes pressed against it from the inside. But I was alone. I moved my hands across the glass, fingertips tracing the wet, cold patterns. A soft tap answered, like knuckles against metal, but fleeting, gone before I could confirm. The radio crackled. A static whisper, distant, teasing. I hadn't turned it on. I hadn't touched it, yet it hummed in the background, repeating, folding into the low murmur of the night. I could smell it then. Iron, damp, a faint sweetness, like cold decay pressing to the upholstery. It drifted from the air vents, though they were closed. The hum pulsed again, subtle rhythmic, as if waiting for me to notice. I felt my fingers freeze where they rested on the wheel. The air shifted. A soft exhale grazed my ear. My own breath, but sharper, shivering. I lowered my head. The fog on the windshield swirled, twisting into shapes that seemed almost human. Watching, waiting. I tried to shake it off. Focus on the hum. Focus on the road that was nothing but black ahead. Yet the hum changed, rising, falling, playful. I could almost feel it moving along the seats, under the pedals, brushing my hair. every nerve in my body awake. A shadow passed across the dashboard. Slow, pale, uncertain. I blinked. Gone. Just a fog left in its place, curling like smoke from an unseen fire. My chest tightened. I wanted to start the car. The engine, any noise. But when I turned the key, nothing. No lights, no hum, no vibration. Only the soft, cruel pulse of that living quiet. I leaned back in my seat, tried to reason. Cold fingers traced my collarbone. I told myself it was a draft, a trick of the mind. But the air carried more than chill. It carried a breath heavy, wet, and cold. It brushed my cheek like lips not meant for kindness. I swallowed, my own breath shaking, turned the frost on the edge of my scarf. Outside, the fog thickened. Inside, the hum found a new rhythm. A whisper now, clearer, teasing the corners of my ears. I could almost hear words. Or was it just a suggestion of them? Either way, it curled in the space between heartbeats. The steering wheel vibrated under my hands. I didn't move. I couldn't move. The fog pressed closer, a pale light glowing in its folds. I shivered, trying to convince myself it was only imagination. A soft drip. From the ceiling? From the vents? I reached up. Nothing. Yet my sweater dampened where the cold fingers touched. Every hair on my arm stood rigid. I closed my eyes. The hum settled into a low, patient now, like it was waiting for me to fall asleep. But sleep was impossible. Cold breath lingered on my neck, the hum deep in my chest, curling around my ribs. And then silence. Not peace. Not emptiness. Just the pause before it moved again. I opened my eyes. The windshield was clear. No shapes. No fog curling. Only my reflection. Pale, wide-eyed. I left the car running that night. Never touched the keys again. Sat in the quiet hum, alone with the soft frost, until the sky lightened. The air smelled cleaner then, though faintly damp. The cold fingers were gone. I don't know if it left, or if it simply waits, quiet and patient, always in the hum, always in the fog. The road was empty when I finally drove away, but the feeling stayed. Breath brushing my neck, a whisper folded into my own, and somewhere, just beyond the pale light of morning, the hum smiled. The fog had settled early that evening, curling across the highway like a pale, lazy river. I drove slowly, headlights slicing thin ribbons through the mist. The air smelled damp, metallic, like rain trapped in the asphalt. The billboard appeared without warning, a towering skeleton of steel, half-rotted with clinging to its frame. The light above it flickered, stuttering like a nervous heartbeat. At first, I thought it was just an advertisement, but the faces, they weren't familiar. They shifted, slowly, almost imperceptibly. A man with hollow eyes, then a woman with pale skin, hair clinging to her face. Every time I blinked, they changed. I felt my hands tighten around the steering wheel. The hum of the engine felt heavier somehow, vibrating through my chest. Their eyes followed me, not just on the billboard, through the windshield. A cold mist brushed my neck. It smelled faintly of earth, of decayed leaves, like the highway itself was breathing. The asphalt glistened beneath the pale headlights. Every crack and stain seemed to writhe. I slowed. The faces warped more now, lips twitching as if whispering. I couldn't hear words, but the intent was there, watching, waiting. I wanted to look away, but my eyes wouldn't let me. A soft rustle came from the trees lining the road. Or maybe it was from inside the car. The hum of the engine faltered, almost silent, then returned like a sigh. The billboard flickered again. One face, a child this time, pale and wet-eyed, stared straight at me. I felt a pressure behind my eyes, as if the fog itself pressed inward. The world narrowed. Just me, the road, and that flickering, broken frame. I drove past slowly. The fog thickened, swallowing the asphalt in slow waves. The hum became a low, buzzing vibration, threading through my teeth, my skull. I could feel the cold mist seep through the cracks of the car door, curling along my sleeves. The faces multiplied. Now there were dozens morphing, bleeding into one another. Some laughed softly. Others just stared. All of them aware. All of them waiting. I told myself it was a fog, the flickering light, tired eyes, but the static in my mind whispered otherwise. Every blink brought a new detail. A hand reaching out from the edge of the frame, a mouth stretching too wide, a shadow melting into the concrete, pooling at the base of the sign. I tried to move faster, but the fog clung, sticky and suffocating. The headlights barely reached the white lines. The faces blurred into pale light, still chasing, still shifting. I glanced in the rear-view mirror. The billboard! It wasn't behind me anymore, but the eyes had followed. They lingered in the glass, staring from angles they shouldn't have been able to occupy. I felt a twitch in my chest, a heartbeat out of rhythm. The tires hummed against the wet asphalt. I could hear my own breathing now, ragged, shallow, each exhale condensed, mist curling in front of my face. The fog whispered around me, twisting, folding, a living thing. I passed another sign, old and blank, and expected relief. But the soft glow returned out of the corner of my eye. A face, flickering, pale, watching. I dared not look directly. It followed, even as I forced my gaze on a road. Then, just as suddenly, silence. The fog thinned, dissolving into the night. The asphalt stretched empty and black, unbroken. The billboard was gone. My hands shook. The hum of the engine was normal again, steady, predictable. No whispering now, no eyes. I tried to convince myself it was over, that it had been the fog, the flicker, my imagination. But every time I blinked, every time I felt the cold breath of the night brush my neck, I knew it was still there, waiting. It was late. The road stretched ahead, narrow and wet, reflecting the pale glow of the streetlights. The night smelled like damp earth, and the mist clung to my coat. I was driving slowly, tires humming against the asphalt. A shadow appeared. At first, I thought it was a tree swaying, or maybe the wind playing tricks. But it stepped into my lane, pale still, watching, just before the tires. I froze, breath caught somewhere deep. My hands gripped the wheel, knuckles white. The hum from the engine, it felt louder now, pulsing, like it was aware. I blinked. The figure didn't move. Not a twitch, not a shiver. Its shape was familiar, somehow wrong, like someone I should have remembered. Then I looked away, just for a second. When I glanced back, it was gone. The lane was empty, fog curling along the edge of the road. My heart thumping too loud for quiet. I kept driving, slowly. Each shadow between the trees looked like it could step out again. The hum lingered. Beneath it, I thought I heard a soft shuffle, or was it the tires shifting over wet leaves? I tried to rationalize. Maybe a person had crossed and vanished into the fog. Maybe my eyes were tired. But the road had never felt so narrow, so alive. A memory clawed at me. I had seen this figure before, or thought I had. In dreams, maybe, or in the reflection of a window I shouldn't have looked through. My fingers twitched against the wheel. The hum rose again. Not the car, not the tires. Something else. I slowed even more. The mist wrapped around the headlights. Thick now, swallowing the lines of the road. I could feel eyes behind me, though I hadn't dared glance back. Cold, patient, waiting. Every now and then, a branch would scrape the windshield. A slow, dragging whisper. The memory pressed harder. Faces I should have recognized. People I had lost. People I had left behind. I wanted to move. To drive faster, escape. But something rooted me to the lane. The hum thrummed in my chest. A sudden flicker in the fog. A shape just on the edge of vision. Same height. Same stillness. I dared a glance. Nothing. Only the fog curling back into itself, smooth and silent. The air smelled of wet leaves and metal. The world seemed narrowed to the lane ahead. Tires rolling through fog. The hum threading through my ribs. And yet, I felt it had crossed again. Behind me, watching, waiting for the moment, I remembered something I didn't want. The lane twisted. The shadows bent. I could hear soft footsteps, though the road was empty. A rhythm almost like breathing, close to mine. I tried to blink it away. Try to focus on the wet lines, the hum of the tires, the cold press of the seat beneath me. But then it happened. A movement, slight. A crossing, just behind the rear view. My stomach dropped. My chest rose. The hum sharpened into edges, slicing the silence. I couldn't turn my head. Not fully. Not without feeling the weight of what I would see. The memory hit, sudden, regret curling, thick and bitter. Mistaking presence for absence. Letting someone fade without looking. Letting them go. The lane opened. Empty. Smooth. Only the hum, soft now, fading. I drove on, tires whispering through fog, the world quieting around me. I don't know if it was real, if I imagined it, if the figure was someone I lost, or someone I was meant to see again. The road bent. Street lights vanished. Mist rolled over the asphalt like slow water. And still, I could feel it, crossing behind me, waiting, watching, then silence. The hum was gone. The lane straight and pale. I was alone. I kept driving. Alone. The air smelled damp. Mildew clung to the cracked tiles, heavy and sharp. A faint drizzle outside tapped against the corrugated roof, slow and irregular. I pushed the door open. It groaned, the hinges loose, tired. Inside, the light was pale, almost a memory, slipping across the grimy sink. The floor felt uneven beneath my shoes. Tiles shifted under my weight with a hollow echo. Something rustled, maybe the wind, maybe not. I stepped closer to the mirror. Its glass was smeared with age, streaked with something darker than dirt. For a moment, I thought I saw movement behind me, soft, hesitant. A whisper curled in the corner of the room. No one was there. The voice was low, almost a sigh, brushing along the walls that didn't exist. I leaned closer to the doorway. Shadows folded into themselves, twisting where the light should have been. The air thickened, like the room was breathing around me. A sudden hum started, quiet at first, like a fridge in the distance. It vibrated through the tiles, through my chest. I froze, feeling it crawl under my skin. The stalls were empty. Broken doors swung slowly, creaking against their frames. Inside, the darkness pooled, deep and oily, and I thought I saw shapes stretching along the walls. I touched the counter. Cold, wet, sticky. Fingers left no mark, but the sensation lingered, as if the surface remembered someone else. A drip echoed from the far end. Steady, soft, endless. The sound became a pulse, a rhythm, like the room itself was alive, listening. The whispers returned. Closer now. No words. Just breaths and the faint scrape of nails across something brittle. I walked slowly toward the back wall. Every step pressed against shadows that shifted beneath my feet. I wanted to turn around, but the doorway seemed farther than before. Something passed along the ceiling, light as silk. I couldn't see it, only feel it brushing the back of my neck. Goosebumps crawled down my arms. The sinks rattled. A soft, hollow tapping, metal on porcelain. I held my breath, the hum in the floor rising, merging with the taps. The air smelled worse here. Rot and mildew, mixed with something metallic. I gagged, but it lingered, pressing into my throat, into my chest. I pressed my palm to the nearest wall. It was warm, almost pulsing. A faint vibration traveled through my fingers. The whisper swirled again, faster this time, brushing against my ears from every corner. I tried to understand, tried to catch a word. Nothing, only the feeling of being watched from the darkness between shadows. I turned toward the door. It shivered in its frame. The hum dropped, leaving only the drip, slow and heavy. I stepped back, careful, but the floor seemed to shift beneath me. A shadow stretched along the wall, thin and curling, darker than the blackest tile. I thought it reached for me. I blinked and it was gone. Only the hum lingered in my chest. The whispering had stopped, leaving silence so thick it pressed against my eardrums. I leaned against the doorway, trembling. The room waited behind me, patient, breathing softly, unseen. The smell, the hum, the shadows, they would not leave with me. Outside, the rain had stopped. The world smelled clean. Inside, the forgotten restroom remained, a quiet cage of damp, shadow, and whispers. I stepped away. The door creaked shut behind me, and in that pale, empty building the darkness settled, alone once more. The highway stretched thin beneath the pale wash of moonlight. Fog pressed against the edges of the asphalt. curling around the cracked guardrails. I drove slow, too slow, feeling the hum in my chest, a vibration I couldn't quiet. At the edge of the road, I first saw it, a figure, still, waiting. Its shape was too dark to measure, but I knew it was there, watching, always watching. I blinked. The headlights flickered, and it didn't move. The tires rolled over gravel, small stones skittering and echoing into the emptiness. I swallowed, tasting the coppery sharpness of fear on my tongue. There was no wind, but the air pressed against my skin, thick and damp, carrying the faint rustle of fabric or maybe leaves. I tried to tell myself it was a hitchhiker or a trick of the shadows, but my chest pulsed faster. The hum deepened. It was like it reached into my rib cage and drummed there, slow, steady. The figure shifted just slightly, enough to make my heart skip. I caught a glimmer of something pale, maybe a face, maybe reflection. It didn't wave, didn't speak. It only waited. I slowed again. Tires squealed softly over the worn lane markings. The headlights painted the asphalt in a trembling rectangle, and the fog swallowed the rest. A faint smell, like smoke curling from damp leaves, rose into my nose. I couldn't breathe. I glanced in the rear view. Empty road. Nothing but the static hum of the engine. When I looked back ahead, it had moved a hair closer, or maybe I had. I couldn't be sure. There was a whispering in the stillness. Not words, not quite, but a vibration I felt more than heard. My hands gripped the wheel until my knuckles turned white. The air smelled metallic, like rust and wet stone. The shadow at the side of the road seemed to stretch taller than any human should. Its shape pulled into itself, dark and folding, a space where nothing should live. I wanted to roll past, to ignore, to pretend it wasn't there, but my legs were locked, my body unwilling to move forward. The hum in my chest swelled. I could feel it now in my throat, buzzing under my skin, crawling down my arms. And the shadow watched. It didn't breathe, but I could feel it exhale. Cold, soft, hungry. I thought I saw eyes, deep and pale, like moonlight trapped under glass. They blinked once, twice. I tried to turn away. My fingers trembled. The road stretched empty on both sides, yet it felt like I was trapped in a tunnel of air and fog. Then a step, soft, almost polite, from the darkness. I didn't see it, but I felt it press the pavement, felt it scrape against the hum of my chest. The headlights flickered again, and for a moment I saw it clearly. A silhouette impossibly thin, limbs too long, posture wrong, standing perfectly still, waiting. I breathed, or thought I did. The smell of wet asphalt mixed with something sour, like old earth turned over, deep and rotting. It lingered in my nose and my mind, and the shadow stayed. I considered rolling the window down, just a crack, feeling the cold seep in, but the air wasn't cold. It was heavy, pressing, as if the night itself leaned toward me. The hum grew louder, or maybe I did. I realized the figure was no longer at the roadside. It had not moved physically, yet the space around me tightened, thickened. I could feel its gaze in my bones, soft and unyielding. Time stretched, or stopped. I don't know which. The headlights trembled over the asphalt lines, painting everything in half light, half shadow. And I saw it again just beyond the edge of the fog. Waiting, patient, still. I pressed the accelerator. The hum didn't stop. It followed, lingering in my chest, echoing in the hollow of my lungs. The figure stayed at the side, yet somehow it was everywhere now. I reached the next bend in the highway. The fog thinned. The trees receded. I glanced back. The shadow had vanished. Or maybe it had just chosen not to show itself. My hands shook, and I could still feel its presence in the air and the hum. The smell of damp leaves and rust stayed in my nose. I drove on, slowly, always slowly. The night stretched endlessly, quiet but watching. And I knew, somewhere at the edge of the road, in the fog and the silence, it waited, always waiting. The road was empty. Fog curled low along the asphalt, thick and wet, settling into the soles of my shoes. My hands gripped the steering wheel, tight enough to leave pale prints. A red light flickered ahead. At first, I thought it was another car, distant, blurred through the mist. Then it blinked again. Closer. Too close. I blinked. The tail light vanished. Nothing but the fog and the faint hum of my engine remained. My breath hitched. I listened. The hum lingered, a low vibration in my chest, like the earth itself was shifting. I glanced in the rearview mirror. Empty. The fog pressed against the glass, damp and whispering. I could almost feel a shape moving inside it. Slow, patient. I shook my head. I was alone. A shadow stretched across the road. Not quite human. A flicker of movement at the edge of my vision. I turned too fast. Nothing. The dashboard lights painted my hands in pale rectangles. I rubbed them. Still, the hum persisted. I could feel it under my skin, a vibration that threaded through my bones. The tail light came back. Just a glimpse. Red. Shimmering between the fog. It lingered a moment longer than it should, like it knew I was watching. Then gone again. I swallowed. My throat was dry. The hum deepened, almost a whisper now. I tried to focus on the road, but every shadow seemed to twitch. Something brushed along the side of the car. Rustling. Soft. A pause. Then silence. The fog thickened. I could smell it now. Damp earth, wet metal, something acrid underneath. The headlights barely cut through it. Shapes move where they shouldn't. They slipped just outside the glow. I forced myself to breathe. In. Out. Slow. The hum pulsed with each exhale, matching my heartbeat. Another flicker. The red taillight. Close again. It lingered behind a bend. Too perfect. Too deliberate. I blinked. Gone. I thought I saw movement in the mirrors. A figure, pale in the fog, standing perfectly still. Eyes fixed on me. I looked away. When I glanced back, nothing. The vibration grew. I gripped the wheel until my knuckles ached. The hum wasn't coming from the car anymore. It was around me, under me, inside me. I slowed. The fog thickened at the edges of my headlights. Shapes moved just out of reach. I didn't want to look, but I couldn't stop. The tail light blinked again. So close now it felt like it could touch the car. I tried to call out, but my voice was swallowed by the fog. Silence. And then a flicker across the dashboard glass. A reflection? Or something else. I thought I saw the shape move alongside the road. It matched the light. A rhythm. Blink. Step. Disappear. The smell of wet metal thickened. I could hear the rustle of leaves. Or was it clothing? Something brushing, whispering, brushing again. Every nerve on my skin woke at once. I blinked, and it was gone. No light, no figure, just a road, stretching out like a pale ribbon into the fog. I forced myself to breathe. The hum faded to a distant vibration. My hands relaxed, though my fingers stayed tight on the wheel. The fog thinned slightly at the edges, leaving the world pale and soft. I drove on. Every corner, every bend. I expected it to return, but nothing followed. Nothing waited. And yet, I knew it had been there, watching, measuring, patient. The road stretched on. The hum settled into a quiet thrum beneath the tires. I didn't look back. I didn't need to, because the tail light had left its mark. A memory in the fog, a pulse in the silence, a flicker of red that I would carry with me, long after the road ended. The fog came early that evening. It rolled across the highway like smoke, thick and pale. I could barely see the lines on the asphalt, only the dim glow of my headlights cutting through the gray. Every mile felt heavier. The hum of the engine sounded distant, swallowed by the mist. I thought I was alone, but the feeling of eyes never left. The air smelled damp, earthy, with something faintly metallic beneath it. Soft rustling drifted from the trees along the shoulder, but when I glanced, nothing moved. I slowed. The fog thickened, curling around the car like fingers. My hands gripped the wheel tighter, and I realized the shadows were no longer separate. They merged, sliding along the edges of the fog, patient. A whisper, or maybe it was the wind. It lingered just beyond comprehension. I couldn't tell if it called my name or warned me. The road curved ahead. The highway ended in a forgotten stretch, cracked and uneven, Streetlights flickered weakly, like they'd given up. Even then, I felt it. The presence at the corner of vision, just behind the mist. I stepped out. The fog swallowed me immediately. It clung to my skin, wet and cold, and I could hear my breath, ragged, uneven, small in the vast silence. Soft footsteps pressed into the ground behind me. Not heavy, but steady. I held my breath. The fog pulsed around me, and for a moment, it felt like it had its own heartbeat. Every sense became sharper. The smell of wet asphalt, the dampness of my hair, the subtle scrape of branches brushing my arms. I couldn't see, but I could feel the movement circling. I tried to move, feet reluctant against the cold road, and the whispers rose slightly, so soft they could have been a wind through dead leaves. Shadows shifted in the fog. I knew I shouldn't look, and yet I did. A pale light shimmered through gray, and I thought for a moment I saw someone there. Or something. It didn't move toward me, but the sense of being watched grew heavier. Time lost meaning. Minutes stretched like shadows in the fog. I leaned against the car, tried to remember what it felt like to be just normal, but the fog wouldn't let me. It pressed, quiet but unyielding, like the weight of a hand on my shoulder I could not see. A low hum rose through the mist. Not from the earth, not the car. It was beneath, between, surrounding. I could feel it in my chest, vibrating along my ribs, a strange rhythm I couldn't match. I stopped trying to understand. I stopped trying to fight it. Every instinct told me to run, but my legs refused. And then the whispers faded. The shadows receded slightly, melding into the gray as though they had never been separate. I realized I was still alone. Or maybe I'd always been with them. The fog pressed closer. I leaned back against the cold metal of the car, letting it wrap around me, letting it take the edges of fear away, slowly, gently. Somewhere, a branch snapped. A faint brush of movement in the corner of my eye. I didn't flinch. I only breathed. The highway had ended hours ago, but it didn't matter. I didn't need the road anymore. The fog carried me now, soft, constant, final. I felt the weight of the world slip, the silence folding around me like a lullaby. There was no one to call for, no footsteps to follow, only the hum of the mist and the gentle, relentless pulse of being watched. I closed my eyes. The chill of the fog seeped into my bones. It whispered promises I didn't understand, but I didn't need to. I let it move through me, through my hands, through my hair, through my chest. It brushed my cheeks like soft fingertips, and I stopped thinking of escape. The highway ended. The fog embraced. I was neither running nor hiding. I was held. And in that final moment, the whispering quiet, the merging shadows, the soft, wet weight of the fog, I felt the world let go.